What is up, fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Danth Valley coming at you with some good old-fashioned, really crappy NBA content. Before we get into it, just the usual reminder and also my plea to subscribe to us wherever you consume us if you have not done so just yet. If you're not with us on YouTube, hit that sub button, like and comment on videos. Engage with the community. We're really trying to build up HardwoodKnocks on YouTube. It's been a lot slower than I wanted to, so help us out. Hit the sub button. Also, download every episode wherever you get your actual podcast, Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, whatever your player of choice is. If you've done both of these things, one, I love you. Two, tell people about us. Shout us out on Twitter. Retweet our promos. Anything that could help us, again, continue to grow in what is a very saturated, we get it, basketball content market. But look, if you're in the comments and you hate us or you hate listening, we really do put a lot of work into covering the league as thoroughly and as unseriously yet seriously as possible. For this, I want to talk about my MVP ladder. I do that every 2 weeks for Bleacher Report, so I'm going to go through it. I will maybe stop doing it once it becomes relevant, but early on, there are shifts at the top. This is only our second one. We're not even a month into the season, and I think a lot of things have changed. You can go back and check out the first one that I did 2 weeks ago. Again, these are done on a bi-weekly basis right now. I want to remind us all, though, that I do have a set of criteria where I understand that the MVP criteria is subjective. I don't weight record as much. I'm looking at players who are most impactful, but I'm also trying to separate, do they actually just play on necessarily shitty teams and they're able to easily uplift shitty teams, because that's not necessarily a hard baseline to stick with. That's not to say that net rating swings aren't impressive. It's just that if in the Warriors case, let's use Steph, the bench has been by and large awful. He has propped up this team and is really good. He's on this ladder. I want to make it clear, but how much do we weight that? And that's what I struggle with the most. You can let me know what you think in the comments or on Twitter. Get at me on our Discord. Join our Discord channel. The link to that is in the YouTube and the podcast description. But yeah, let's get into this. Throw it up on the screen for anyone who's following along on YouTube. Get to my, I blow through the top, numbers 6 through 10. I have a tie at number 10 right now in the honorable mentions department. I have Kevin Durant and Joel Embiid. They were both previously unranked in the last MVP ladder. Embiid is averaging 40 points, 5.3 assists, 2.8 blocks, and 16.5 free throw attempts per game since rejoining the Philadelphia 76ers rotation 4 games ago. He hasn't played enough to be placed any higher than this, but his case will continue to strengthen while James Harden is sidelined, especially if he's putting up these mind-melting numbers. Durant, meanwhile, is just on fire. He is shooting and scoring and passing and defending his butt off, and the Brooklyn Nets look like an actual basketball team following Kyrie Irving's suspension. I would keep my eyes on KD's MVP stock too. It could look either they're doing it without Kyrie Irving, in which case he gets the narrative boon of, he's doing it without Kyrie, and what is Ben Simmons right now? Or Kyrie does eventually come back after he finishes, his laundry to-do list after being suspended for promoting the anti-Semitic documentary. We don't know when he's going to come back, but if he comes back, he'll be a distraction. And if KD can lead the Nets through this and prevent them from blowing up, I have my doubts, but Durant is balling out right now. I would say, everything about him has stood out, but the defense in particular, some of the help, rim protection, he's been really good. So those two are tied at number 10. I didn't want to choose. Nikola Jokic comes in at number 9 for me. I think people will campaign to put him higher. I do this as who I think should win the award, not who I think is going to win the award. I don't think Jokic will finish in the top 10, maybe. He's not going to win the award because voter fatigue is a thing. Right, wrong, it's a thing, whatever. The Nuggets are starting to look dominant, though. Their schedule has something to do with it. They're beating the Thunder and the Lakers. They beat the Spurs. But he owns the highest net rating swing in the league. That is a testament to some wonky bench returns, but it's also wild because some of the bench lineups have been good, and Jokic has just visibly de-emphasized his scoring and three-point shooting, not shooting the three ball well, not shooting it as often, just not as aggressive as a scorer. I think there's probably value in that. Let's get these other guys reps so they can figure it out and be ready for the playoffs. You also have Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. coming back from their injuries, so you're trying to integrate them, working with KCP to get his chemistry down, having Aaron Gordon score within the flow of the offense, giving the ball to Bones, not necessarily playing a ton alongside Jokic relative to other players. So there are other players that have the ball or are operating as play finishers. That doesn't dilute his case. I just want to make that clear. But I'm splitting hairs here. We're 4 weeks into the season or whatever it is. This is a tough field to crack. Jokic was 8th last time around. Ja Morant comes in at 8th. He was 4 last time around. Falling 4 spots, not unprecedented this time of year. It's also not a big deal. The Grizzlies do spit fire when Morant is on the floor. But over the past 2 weeks since I last did this, he's shooting under 31% from three and sub 67% from the foul line. That's just something to monitor here. And also, during this stretch, guess who leads the Grizzlies in scoring? Desmond Bane, not John Morant. That's not really a demerit against him. I just thought that was a fun fact. Long live Desmond Bane. Devin Booker's at number 7. He was previously ranked 5th. There's nothing he's done to warrant dropping down 2 spots. It's just that the field in front of him is huge. But look at the Suns, and they're coming off this loss to the Heat. They did almost win. Scoring regression from Chris Paul. An injury to Chris Paul, heel injury. Cameron Johnson, knee injury, out for a while. Still no Jay Crowder. Borderline vanishing acts at times from DeAndre Ayton. And yet the Suns are just this regular season machine. Booker is the primary reason why. He is that steadying force on both on and off the ball, who scales to so many different lineups and offensive approaches that I'm at the point where quantifying his impact is just impossible for me almost. A good start, though, he ranks 3rd in plus minus for the season. Under the circumstances, that's pretty damn impressive. That wraps up my honorable mentions. There is no 6th because I have a tie for 5th place. It is Steph Curry and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I think this might surprise some people. And I don't think that it should. The response that I'm expecting to get is, Steph and Shai both play for sub 500 basketball teams right now. It's true, but wins aren't a player stat. Choosing between Steph and SGA when it came down to it was hard, so I simply didn't. And I can't bring myself to care that the Golden State Warriors are comfortably below 500 and combusting on defense, or that the Oklahoma City Thunder ended their 4-game losing streak by beating the shorthanded Toronto Raptors and the sad, sorry, directionless Knicks, who we might talk about in a few minutes. Both Steph and SGA are only responsible for what's happening when they're on the floor, and their teams are winning those minutes. Let's look at Steph. Golden State is a plus 7.9 points per 100 possessions when Curry plays. That's a 27.2 point increase over its differential when he's not on the court. It helps that he's playing within a killer starting 5. It also helps his case. That statistical case right there. It's not a good thing for the Warriors. I want to make that clear. But it's helped this net rating swing that the bench is absolutely terrible. That doesn't make his job any easier. Curry uplifts everyone around him just by virtue of existing. He needs neither the ball nor actual numbers to break defenses. And yet, he's got the numbers anyway. 32.8 points, 6.5 assists, while finding nylon on 64.8% of his twos and 43.4% of his 11.9 3-point attempts per game. I need to fan myself off. That's a lot of 3-point attempts. Putting Curry any higher, though, than 5th for me, it feels a little off. Over 70% of his possessions have come alongside Draymond Green and Andrew Wiggins, the Warriors' the other 2 best players, I would say. If you want to argue for Jordan Poole, I would say absolutely not. Playing a little bit better lately, but not as good as those 2. And then the bench just being so bad, it unnecessarily exacerbates Steph's importance. If the Warriors were, like 9-3 right now, in spite of that bench, and it was sort of the same story, then yes, Steph's case is stronger. I guess they would have to win the minutes by more when he's on the court. I'm just saying it didn't necessarily have to be like this. The Warriors chose to stack the deck with youngsters who are either they're not going to play, like a la James Wiseman, and then in which case they're taking up a spot on your roster, or they are going to play a la also James Wiseman previously and struggle and hurt you. I don't know how that should, affect Steph Curry's case. He's in the top 5 for me. That's a compliment. SGA, meanwhile, 31.1 points, 5.7 assists, 2.1 steals, and 1.5 blocks per game on mind-melting efficiency of his own. Among everyone to attempt at least 35 pull-up jumpers this year, only Steph and KD have a higher effective field goal percentage. SGA is shooting 73% at the rim and 51.7% on step-back jumpers. This all comes, by the way, on what can only be described as end-all usage. Out of 273 players to appear in at least 10 games, Luka Dončić is the only one with a higher share of unassisted buckets. Through it all, meanwhile, SGA has kicked it into high gear on defense, and the Thunder have outscored opponents by 33 points when he plays in total. That's 1 point more than the Dallas Mavericks have outpaced opponents by with Luka himself on the court. Again, these are not perfect comps, but I would argue when you look at the Mavericks on paper and their 2nd and 3rd and 4th best players, just having Christian Wood, Spencer Dinwiddie, Dorian Finney-Smith. I don't know how close the Thunder come to rivaling that direct supporting cast, as shallow as the Mavericks are. Lou Dort is great. Josh Giddey will show flashes. Poku, dude, he's been amazing of late. Everything just like blocking a crap ton of shots. I mean, it's not, he was a novelty at one point, and he is a favorite of this podcast because his game is just so quirky looking. He's a good player now. So I'm not trying to discredit what the Thunder have going for them. But like, you look at this supporting cast, everyone thought OKC was tanking. Shea being able to lead them to not just respectability, but a decidedly net positive point differential when he's on the court. That's impressive. And I think it's worth being fifth. We can get into later in the season, seeing how far below they might be below 500. They're closer to 500 than the Dubs right now, and a bunch of other teams for that matter. So I'm not getting, like I said, too caught up in the record. Steph was previously ranked 6th, by the way, and Shea was previously ranked 7th. Donovan Mitchell comes in at number 4 for me. His previous ranking was 2. He drops 2 spots from last time through no fault of his own. The top 5 landscape is just a gauntlet of megastar power. Mitchell missed 2 games because of an ankle issue over the past 2 weeks, and he had a couple of shaky performances from beyond the arc. That set the stage for this teensy-weensy dip. Is it splitting near invisible sized hairs? Hell fucking yes. Do I hate myself? Abso-freaking-lutely. That's how it goes atop this early season mountain. Overall, though, Mitchell just continues to slay defenses from basically everywhere. The share of his shots coming at the rim is at its highest since 2018-2019. A pretty substantial feat given some of the lineups in which he works. When you're talking about he has 2 or 3 non-shooters on the court with him. More disarming, he's dropping in 75% of those looks at the basket. That's a logic liquefying number, even by early season standards. Exactly one player is a better high volume, off the bounce 3-point shooter flamethrower right now, by the way. Mitchell is shooting 40.7% on off the dribble triples on more than 5 attempts per game. The only player with a higher success rate on those looks with that volume, Steph Curry himself. Everyone should be, to me, in my opinion, impressed with how Mitchell has handled playing in a new environment. Some of the timing and placement of his passes can get weird, but his turnover rate has not exploded, and he's averaging as many assists per 36 minutes as he did over the past 2 seasons while going with his career-high scoring rate per 36 minutes. Darius Garland is back, had that 50-point explosion on Sunday night. His return will diminish Cleveland's reliance on Mitchell. That's actually a good thing. Mitchell's averaging over 39 minutes per game for the season. That can and will and must come down. Whether the pullback alongside Garland will adversely impact Mitchell's MVP case, that remains to be seen. It hasn't yet. It also doesn't matter, and it will continue not to matter so long as the Cavs look like contenders with him, because that's what they still are in my book. They've had rocky performances, lost to some pretty good teams, had that heartbreaker against the the Warriors the other night, just really drawing blanks there. They are in probably the second tier of contenders still for me. That is the more important factor, but it will be interesting to see if Garland and that dynamic impacts Mitchell's case at all, just because when you have so many good players, I do think it's easier to dilute an MVP case. 3 for me, this one, look, before I even get to it, this hurt. And I want to make it clear he's not going to stay here. And it's wild to me that number 3 is going to be considered an insult, but it's Giannis. He was number 1 last time, and there's exactly one number that prevented him from being number 1 again. 3. Left knee soreness cost him 3 of the Milwaukee Bucks' previous 4 games entering Monday night. He now ranks outside the top 150 in minutes played. Quality over quantity. It's early. Blah, 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 blah. But the margins are just razor thin so early into the season. Other players, including the 2 to come, are providing profoundly impactful performances across larger samples. That counts for something to me. Again, and as I reiterated, it doesn't mean Giannis will be here forever. He won't. He was my MVP pick for the year, by the way, and I would still pick him to win it. It's just in the meantime, when you don't have the sample, I just have to make this change in the spirit of everything. But you dig into the numbers and it's like, well, is this still sort of hopeless if Giannis is going to stay healthy the rest of the way? He's averaging 31.8 points, 12.2 rebounds, 5.3 assists, 1.1 steals, and 1.4 blocks, while downing 59.4% of his twos and deleting entire possessions from existence on defense, both on and away from the ball. Opponents are shooting 50% against him at the rim. That's one of the 7 stingiest marks allowed among 78 players to contest as many close range attempts as Giannis so far. I do think there's an overindulgence from the perimeter, and that's probably the sole non-availability knock against Giannis right now. Should almost 1/3 of his looks be coming from mid-range if he's shooting 25% from there? Perhaps not. I'm a big advocate, though, of there's value in the volume. The same goes for his pull-up threes, which he's not really hitting at a high clip himself. They keep defenses on tilt. Also, sub 30% from mid-range is low for Giannis, so that will come up. Also, none of this matters. He's a dominant anomaly even when he's not hitting those shots. Number 2, this is, look, it's a mea culpa here. Number 2 is Jason Tatum. He was unranked in the last MVP ladder. Talk about your big, bloated, inexcusable misses. I left him off. I too heavily weighted what happened in the Boston Celtics loss to the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Chicago Bulls, along with Jason Tatum slumping efficiency on off-the-dribble jumpers. I was wrong, and I am sorry. I'm correcting it here. I'm not overcorrecting it here, though. He came pretty darn close to topping the whole ladder for me. His numbers induced drool. He's averaging 32.3 points and 4.1 assists per game on 65.3% true shooting while getting to the foul line at a career-high clip. His pull-up jumper, as I already mentioned, it continues to miss the mark, but he's somehow converting 80% of his looks at the basket while getting to the line a ton. That is definitely going to offset any sort of perimeter wonkiness. It also helps that I think Boston has streamlined a lot of his three-point attempts. More of those are assisted than last year, and he is banging in those. With that said, Boston has increased its reliance on Tatum over the past couple of weeks. He has responded by reminding us all that, yeah, the playmaking leap is real. His potential assists are up during this stretch, and he's never been more unpredictable or on target as a live dribble passer. Even just the over the shoulder kickouts, those have been fantastic from him as well. I also look at it this way. Almost no other player is as important to his team at both ends of the floor. There's Giannis, maybe Shea at this point, and that's probably it. It feels like the Celtics have Tatum checking harder assignments. He remains disruptive away from the ball, and he's turning blocks from behind into an art form. That Tatum, by the way, is doing so much to damn near everything with a left wrist injury makes zero sense. Sure, his MVP credentials may be hard-pressed to fend off Giannis and a certain someone who's coming up over the course of a season, but if he recaptures any of that off-the-dribble jump-shooting mojo, I think we're looking at the most complete player in the NBA, which then is going to significantly bump up his MVP credentials. So he's at number 2. Sorry for leaving him off the first time. I do not think number 1 is going to come as a surprise for anyone. It's Luka Dončić. And what's interesting, I'm sure many people had him number 1 from the start. I had him number 3 last time. The extent, and this for listeners of this podcast who are, religious listeners, again, I love you all, but this is going to sound repetitive. The extent to which Dallas is relying on Luka is staggering, and it's also historical. 2 other players have posted a higher usage rate. 2016-17 Russell Westbrook and 2018-2019 James Harden. Even more absurd, almost 91% of Doncic's made buckets have now gone unassisted. Among every player to average at least 15 minutes and appear in 5 or more games, his 90.7% mark would be the largest share of unassisted field goals made in the NBA's tracking database, which goes all the way back to 96-97. And based off where those numbers were trending, I would argue it might be the highest share in NBA history. I don't know enough about the history of the game, how it was in the 60s, and I don't think it would be like that in the 70s, but the 80s maybe. But as we were getting into the early 2000s and 90s, the people who led the league in the share of unassisted field goals made were in the 70% range. Now, let's be clear. All-consuming usage doesn't automatically translate to substance. There will be those who argue Dončić cannot play any other way, that he has to be an unprecedented focal point. Maybe there's validity to that stance, but we wouldn't know. The Mavs have never armed the offense enough to explore displacing Dončić from the ball. Left untouched, this roster isn't built to make that shift now either. Spencer Dinwiddie and Christian Wood combined to open additional offensive doorways, but Dallas has opted so far against playing all 3 together. And here's the other thing for me. Dončić is wrecking worlds playing this way. His 34.3 points per game lead the league and come on 60.9% shooting inside the arc, including about a 50% clip from mid-range. His sub 30% success rate from beyond the arc will rankle people, and it did for me last time. It played a part in holding him back to that 3rd spot. Since that first MVP ladder, though, he's shooting 35.6% on treys while still getting to the foul line more than I can count. I also think that his 8.1 assists per game don't do his passing justice. He is third in potential assists per game at 16.3. So Dallas is connecting on fewer than 50% of his assist opportunities. I would say there's a lot that could go into that. Are they getting grenades at the end of the shot clock? Are they just not taking high quality looks? But only Harden and Tyrese Halliburton have generated more potential assists per game. That's a big deal. And I had people in the YouTube comments saying that Dončić isn't a good passer. If you have a problem with the ball dominance, fine. Dončić is not a perfect player, but could we not pretend that he's not a transcendent passer? Conventional wisdom does suggest that he can't keep this up because we've never seen anything like this. He's looked tired in certain games too, but the all Dončić everything model is working. The Mavs are 8th in net rating despite being just 2 games over 500. And if there's anyone who can sustain this unreal usage, it's the 23-year-old who has never been on a Dallas team equipped to saddle him with anything other than unreal usage. That's where I landed with my MVP ladder. Just to recap, and we'll do it in reverse order so that the ties are a little bit less confusing. I have Dončić at 1, Jason Tatum at 2, Giannis Antetokounmpo at 3, Donovan Mitchell at 4, Steph and SGA are tied for 5th, so we jump to 7th. That is going to be Devin Booker. 8 was John Morant. 9 is Nikola Jokic. And a tie for 10th for me right now, Joel Embiid and Kevin Durant. Who's your MVP? Let me know. You can get at me on Twitter. The socials are in the YouTube and podcast description. Until next time, I leave you the shout out to the one, the only, the indelible, an MVP candidate himself, Frank Ntilikina.